Hare Krishna. This is Tamohara Das. I'm your host for our Seva Care Education ongoing educational presentations. Today we have episode 14, which we're very excited about. It's called Care During Tough Times, Marriages and Vaisnava Community Support, which I think many of you will find a very topic that is very timely, very important to all of us. And we're very, very happy to have presenting today Dhanya Rico, who is a certified counselor. She has a specialist degree in marriage and family therapy. I'll just read her bio here. Dhanya is a musician, traveling kirtaniya, and a world-renowned educator on topics of personal and relationship wellness. She holds a master's degree in counselor education and a specialist degree in couples and family therapy. For over a decade, Dhanya has helped empower individuals and relationships to thrive with deep spiritual principles at the core of transformational experiences. So we're very, very happy to have you with us today, Dhanya Prabhu. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much for both of you for organizing this and for having me on. And I just wanted to offer just some quick prayers to invoke the wisdom of our spiritual masters and their grace in trying to hopefully offer something useful and productive in today's conversation. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so again, I think I feel grateful for the opportunity to engage in conversation around this topic. I think that it's timely, certainly in our community, and I also feel like if you took a poll of whether this was timely at any other time, it would be timely then too. It seems like it's kind of an ongoing thing, and I think that it's a natural experience, or these are all natural experiences in and just householder life and family life, and even people who are in the other ashrams, who are sannyasis, who are vanaprasthas, who are brahmacharis, they also come from a family, and they also have their family imprints, and family life affects them also, because as a community, we are all interconnected, ideally interdependent, and mutually influential. So I think that to have an idea, or at least have the conversation going, of how to deal with these issues, these crises, these difficulties in community, it gives us a sense of our interconnectedness, and it gives us a sense also of how we may be able to serve. And as we know, to serve Krishna's devotees is even more cherished by Krishna himself than service to himself directly. And so I think that that's the highest ideal of what we're trying to do here, is create systems and create dialogues, conversations about how to support one another so that we can get to the main thing, And so, so anyways, as I was kind of contemplating how to address, all these things, essentially what we're speaking to in terms of what's going on right now is the dissolution or the fracture or the crisis of many marriages in our community. And so to be able to discuss that, we also want to I thought it would be interesting to kind of set the scene in terms of just the impression of marriage in the community, right? And so I was looking up the different samskaras, and I don't necessarily know that we traditionally, especially in Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON, that we necessarily ritualize all of. I saw lists starting at around like 16 samskaras, going all the way up to like 35 or 40 samskaras, broken down by different, important moments before conception, when the mother is pregnant, and so on. But what I did notice is that pretty much across the board, there were two samskaras that take place in adulthood. One is marriage, and the other one is death. So the two important rituals that are formalized, right, that have some sort of formality and some sort of ceremony, which I think really points to their importance, are these two anchors of marriage and then of leaving the body. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I think that it's a signifier of the importance of marriage. So I think that the fact that it's qualified as a samskara and that it's performed as this rite of passage is instructive, not just for the people getting married, but also for all the people who witness a marriage coming together. And so I think that the fact that it takes place in community, the fact that a married couple asks for the blessings of the community, the fact that a wedding itself takes so many hands coming together to serve and to put something together, and stringing garlands and gathering ingredients, and that a priest is there to officiate it. When we create something like this, it's a way of involving the community, not just because it's sweet and it's celebratory, it's also because it's supposed to create that, a samskara, an impression, an impact. And usually when we create a ceremony and when we create that impact via samskaras, it's because it implies some form of responsibility. Right? Just like there's a samskara for, the conception of a child. What it implies is that the people who are doing the ceremony now have a responsibility to raise a child, prioritizing its health and its development and its well-being. So the same thing happens in terms of all the following, subsequent samskaras, including marriage. What is the responsibility that we have ourselves as community members to families when they decide to become married? And I think that that's kind of what we're trying to explore today. So responsibility is not just, how can we serve, how can we support, celebrate your moments. I'm married and I have small kids, so a lot of what feels like support is kind of a very day-to-day thing of like, oh, I'll pick up your kid from school if you can't make it, and now how can I make something for their birthday party, and you're sick, oh, don't worry, you can have your kids come over to my house for a play date, and your husband's out of town, and so I'll come over and we'll have our kids play together. That's obvious stuff, and that's very sweet also. Those are the things that are edifying for our friendships and for our kids' friendships, and our spouses, everybody kind of just coming together and doing life together. Oh, we're all coming together, we're going to go to the festival of the Holy Name, and maybe we'll go take a trip and go on pilgrimage together, and those are all amazing. And I think that there's this other aspect of it, what complements all of that and actually completes the experience of doing community together, is to hit these speed bumps, whether they're small speed bumps or they're titanic speed bumps, and to do that in each other's company also, and to do that in a way that feels like we're really companions for one another, and that we're still able to kind of hold our highest spiritual ideals as the framework for how to respond to that. So in that sense, responsibility as people who witnessed and took part in seeing a marriage come together or being companions to a marriage also means how you respond, your ability to respond to hardship, to difficulty, to challenge. And I think that this is something that is not to be taken lightly as a community member, and not to be taken lightly as a friend. So through that, I think that it's important to kind of just remember that, there's deep spiritual principles that are at play when we show up in relationship with each other. Some of us may be coming from different cultures, different upbringings, but there are these similar values which are sourced in Shastra, they're sourced in Srila Prabhupada's teachings, they're sourced in our philosophy, where we understand basic guiding values that are supposed to be informing our relationships. So that's the place that we want to be coming from. And that's where I really want this conversation to center. I think that that's going to be an important place to kind of keep coming back to, which is like, what are the deepest spiritual values and principles that we can operate from? So one thing that I thought was interesting, in the Nectar of Instruction, the fourth verse onward is basically helping us orient to how to, Srila Prabhupada describes it as how to engage with Vaishnavas, different Vaishnavas with discrimination. And I think this is really great because actually in the purport to it, he quotes in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam There's a verse that says, a person who is very faithfully engaged in the worship of the deity in the temple, but who does not know how to behave toward devotees or people in general, is called a prakrita bhakta or kanishta adhikari. So our goal, we may be kanishta adhikaris, feels like a normal, humble, appropriate assessment. And also, that shouldn't be our end goal. Our end goal is to progress, right? Our desire should be to elevate ourselves and to develop ourselves spiritually. And so that means that an interesting measurement of our progress is also our capacity to behave towards devotees appropriately or towards people in general appropriately. And if we don't know how to do it, then that should be also a marker of our lack of development. It's something that we should be able to keep tabs on within ourselves. So how do I behave towards devotees? If I want to elevate that and develop that, then that means that it's also a part of my spiritual progress. It's going to be a way that I'm able to kind of guide and understand how I'm progressing. So then, okay, I was thinking of that. I was like, okay, how I behave towards devotees. Well, then what came to mind after that was the Shikshastakam and how there's a whole verse kind of dedicated toward the demeanor of a devotee. Someone who is able to chant constantly and serve Krishna in that way constantly, which is our end goal, right? That's like our North Star. We always want to be kind of using that to guide us. There's behavioral indicators, right? Characterological indicators of what kind of person that is. And I think that could really inform this situation also. So just as a kind of framework, I was taking each line of the third verse of the Shikshastakam to say, okay, well, what does that look like? And also, how can I complement that with what I've learned, in my training in dealing with relationships and supporting a lot of marriages in my personal life, but also in my clinical life. So I took the first line, right? So more humble than a blade of grass. Well, there's this really wonderful, incredible researcher. I bring her up a lot in a lot of my presentations because I've learned a lot from her. Her name is Brené Brown, and her area of research is shame and vulnerability. She's written incredible books. Highly recommend. She's very generous in sharing her research findings about relationships. So when she describes humility, she has like these different components that I think are really useful in this situation, right? So one element she talks about is grounded confidence. Grounded confidence in humility looks like acknowledging that you don't know everything and that you can be wrong. And this is a beautiful starting place because when we talk about other people's relationships, other people's marriages, it's not our role as community members to be investigators. It's not our role as community members to be data analysts or judges or lawyers. We are meant to show up as support. We are meant to develop compassion. We are also meant to kind of interject and see, like, what of this is learning for myself. And so it's a sort of confidence, right? She's calling it grounded confidence, to feel secure enough to be able to openly admit, I don't know everything, and I don't actually need to know everything in order to show up and offer support. Hand in hand with that, she talks about openness to learning, which means it's a willingness to consider new information, a willingness to ask questions, and to adjust beliefs. Again, not in the spirit of like investigation, I want to ask questions. It's basically, this is mostly in the reflective sense, in the contemplative sense, right? Knowing what I know now or seeing the situation unfold, what am I willing to consider? How do my beliefs encounter this information? What happens to me when I hear this? What comes up for me, right? So an openness to learning about others, about a situation where you may be able to support, but also an openness to learning about ourselves. This kind of leads into the next part, which is accurate self-assessment. So that means I understand my own strengths, I understand my own weaknesses, and what areas in which maybe I need to grow. So this is all, remember, this is all still folded into this first part of the third verse of Shikshastakam, which means more humble than a blade of grass. So really encountering these difficulties when we hear about them, especially if they're very close to us, and saying, in terms of my own accurate self-assessment, what's an area of strength that I may be able to offer to this situation? Right? And what are areas of weakness? Oh, this is something that's really triggering for me. So that's going to be a weakness. I need to know that about myself. Or I feel a little bit biased towards one person or the other person, or, one aspect of the situation. So that's going to be a liability because I may not be able to see clearly. Or I find that maybe I have some component of what's going on in this situation kind of somewhere within me. It's something that it feels like a fault of mine, or something that's been a difficulty, my own personal challenge with it. And so I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm projecting in the situation, or I feel defensive in the situation. So it's to know yourself. I think that it's, it's a journey, and I think that these situations will often illuminate something that can be useful in terms of developing our humility. The other one, which I think is very, very valuable in this situation, is to focus on others. And this means shifting the focus from self-importance to caring for and serving others. This is always going to lead to better relationships. It means that I'm going to be acknowledging, holding space for, recognizing my own reactions, my own feelings, my own challenges in the situation. But I won't ask the people involved to hold space for me and my reaction and my feelings and my conjectures and my assumptions and my solutions even. I'm not going to ask them to bear the responsibility of what's going on for me internally. And I think that that's something that is going to be very important in supporting the people that are going through a difficult time in their marriage and their families and their children, is to make sure not to inadvertently shift the focus to myself. Oh, this is what's going on in my marriage, or this is what I learned in my marriage, and this is what went on for me, or even this is what my parents' marriage, or this is what I, basically not self-referencing, allowing the people who are involved to have their own experience without a projection of what may have gone on in my life, or what I think, or what I believe. She has this one phrase that's really great, which is, I'm here to get it right, not to be right. So that means that developing humility and showing up in support means that you are willing to reorient according to the needs of the situation and the needs of the people involved in the situation. It means that learning is more important than getting it right? Proving yourself. And she also says that humility is a practice and not a trait. So it's not like, you downloaded humility and now it's just like installed in you and you're just like a humble person. It's that actually it's a skill. It's a skill, it's a practice, something that you dedicate yourself to, and it has this kind of cycle of self-reflection and then learning. Self-reflection and learning. Oh, this is where I see I have a gap in what I understand, or I have a gap in how I'm able to show up. Let me learn, right? Something active, something proactive, something that's assertive. I'm going to seek information. So reading books on how to show up for people, reading books on why marriages fall apart, listening to podcasts from reliable sources about, how to be a good friend and how to, what happens on the inside of a marriage. Not everybody may want to go such a deep dive into it. Obviously, it's my area of interest, so I do like to dive deep in that. But even having conversations where you're willing to develop humility in terms of skill, like actual practical skill, and not just assuming that it's like a trait that is sort of just like bestowed upon you, and then once you have it, it's just kind of downloaded into you. So that was the first line, right? More humble than a blade of grass. Then I was thinking, more tolerant than a tree. And so again, this definition of resilience came to mind, because trees are resilient. That's what tolerance sounds like to me. Resilience has a few different elements, and I'll use Brene Brown as a reference as well, because a big part of her research is about resilience. So she says that it's the capacity to lean into vulnerability, embrace imperfections, and move through adversity by cultivating courage, connection, and compassion. And I thought that those three ingredients, courage, connection, and compassion, are so important. Because when she says courage, one of the things that she explains is that dealing with vulnerability in this situation, I think that that's what becomes activated for people in the community in this situation, is how vulnerable relationships are, how vulnerable we are in relationships, how vulnerable the relationship itself is, and of course how vulnerable the whole community feels, because the community is basically a web of interconnected relationships. So everything starts to feel wobbly and unsteady and unpredictable, and that's quite disturbing, So I'm reading when she's explaining these that allowing yourself to fully feel that vulnerability and leaning into your feelings, not trying to avoid pain by becoming aloof or spiritually bypassing or processing through a very cold, unfeeling lens of dry philosophy, really allowing yourself to feel the emotions that you're feeling, but then doing something with that feels courageous. And a lot of times the courageous part is even just looking at the feelings that come up. That is courageous, allowing yourself to have feelings about a situation and not writing it off, or, creating this kind of false detachment narrative, or like, oh, such as Kali Yuga, and, that kind of thing. Like, really allowing yourself to feel your feelings, and then moving from courage into connection, which is, how can I support? How can I receive support? So if I'm feeling something and this is moving me and this is affecting me, or I'm feeling challenged, or even to feel really sorry that something is happening, is an emotional experience. Even if you're not close to the parties involved, even if it's not something that directly impacts your life negatively or positively, because we, here in Alatra, we are quite a huge community. Just to feel the compassion of like, wow, I'm so sorry that the situation is taking place. That is an emotional experience worth sitting with. And that's that third ingredient there, which is compassion. To actually understand that somewhere in our community there is a family or families, and perhaps also friends and extended people involved, that are feeling a lot of pain, and that pain is probably sourced also in great love and concern and care. Wow, like, to allow myself to feel that allows me to respond to a situation in my community in this very human, well-rounded, integrated way. So not avoiding pain, but allowing yourself to feel your way through it, and also seeking support. I'm having a hard time. So seeking support, we'll get into it in a second, how to do that in a way that feels well integrated. But another thing that I thought of when I was thinking, okay, more tolerant than a tree, here in Alatra, we've been having the wackiest weather, because it was like 80 degrees just a few days ago. I think it's like 60 degrees now. So it's obviously feels like rolling the dice in terms of what kind of weather the situation, even one given day. But I was thinking, yeah, trees behave differently according to different seasons. Trees behave differently according to different seasons. It doesn't make them any less tolerant. It means that they're adaptive. It means that they're living entities that are in a dialogue, in relationship with the environment and with the seasons. And so, just like in the Gita, it says, the happiness and distress is like the winter and summer seasons, meaning it's cyclical, meaning that it's somewhat predictable in the sense of, the fact that one season comes out after the other, and that there's a certain sequence to the way that happiness and distress tends to take place in our life. It also means that as a sentient part of nature, we would need to adapt how we express ourselves as these tolerant trees according to what the season is asking of us. So we're responding to nature itself. If you're in a season of life where you feel like you don't have much you can give to a situation, you feel like you have a lot on your plate, you're going through a lot in life, maybe you're struggling with health things, maybe your schedule is really busy, maybe you're not really close to the situation, and so you feel like it's not really your place to interact, and so, or whatever it is that's going on, okay, so then maybe in terms of being more tolerant than a tree, you're like a tree that is wintering, right? A tree is still a tree during winter, and they're dormant, but there's so much that you can do from that dormant state. You can pray, you can wish well, you can make yourself, available to, perhaps in another season, or make yourself just present, even if not active in the situation, right? As a well-wisher. That's possible. It's possible that if you are really close to the situation and you feel moved to serve and to show up, to act, to contribute, to hold space, then maybe you're a tree in flower-bearing spring, and what you're bringing is fruits and flowers and presents and kindness and calls and favors and cooking meals and whatever to the situation. Okay, so then that's the kind of tree that you show up as, and that's also, you do have to generate quite a lot of tolerance to serve in that way also. So allowing yourself to kind of, again, coming back to that self-assessment piece, gauge where you're at in terms of your capacity to give, and know that whatever season you're in, your tolerance, your ability to stay rooted, your ability to be present can look really different. And it's not necessarily our place to judge, this person is tolerating in this way, this person is tolerating in another way. It's a more a contemplative thing. Where am I at, and what kind of tree can I show up as, so to say. Okay, so now the next line. Offering respect unto others without expecting any respect in return. This makes a lot of sense because in a situation where other people are experiencing crisis, where other people are experiencing difficulty, where other people have maybe the rug pulled out from under them, and there's kids involved and there's extended family and so on and so forth, things are going to be chaotic. And it would be the strangest time to expect respect for oneself. It would be extremely, it's a strange time to expect that. It's not what we're aiming to expect in any situation as Vaishnavas, but especially in that situation. Again, trying not to center ourselves and trying to really pull focus towards the people who may need care and may need support. So offering respect unto others, I think the base for that would be trying to the best of our ability to, in our minds and in the way that we speak and in the way that we engage with these people directly or indirectly, is to preserve their dignity, to preserve the dignity of all parties involved. Even if you feel like there is some wrongdoing, even if someone has hurt somebody else, and of course that's exactly what's happening, there's pain, being directed all over the place, kids are suffering, extended families suffering. Yes, and acknowledging that, seeing that clearly, and in no way having that diminish these individuals' dignity and the core of who they are as spirit souls, as members of the community. That's going to be important, not just for them, it's also important for us, because if in our minds and in our hearts we're not affording them this dignity and this respect, we actually won't be able to serve appropriately. We're not going to be so useful. We're not going to be able to offer care because we're not coming from a place of actually seeing them for who they are. We're not coming from a place of truth. The truth of the matter is that these people have a core essential dignity that comes from their connection to Krishna and their connection to other devotees. And sometimes us holding space and remembering, keeping that image of their dignity and of their highest potential can be a form of service. Remembering a version of them that they may not even remember themselves is an incredible service that we can do, especially if these are people that are close to us that we love. Being a little practical, we can expect people to maybe not be gracious during this time, to not even be predictable during this time, to act out of character, out of form, in a way that's uncharacteristic of them. That does happen during times of chaos. We often don't know how we're going to react in situations where we're thrust into a situation of chaos, difficulty, betrayal, whatever. People act all kinds of ways. And so I think that it's reasonable, being the people who are trying to support them, to not expect people to be their most gracious selves and to know that that's likely to happen. This also means, as a response to that we're going to want to maintain healthy boundaries. And sometimes boundaries means also coming together as a community to see how do we protect the most vulnerable parties, which in most of these cases is going to be children, because children are affected by these situations. Children talk about these situations. Children have their own personal emotional experiences about the situation. It's something that often in families we don't really prepare kids necessarily. I don't know that there's a lot of conversation preparing kids for how to deal with what if their parents go through a really hard time, or what if their friends' parents go through a really hard time. And it's also harder to expect of them, like a very high caliber of totally ethical, Vaishnava-like behavior when they're finding out something that they know is very charged with emotion and is very difficult, and they may have a hard time processing themselves. So in order to protect kids, in order to protect extended friends and family, a lot of times we want to have healthy boundaries, which means giving people space, not gossiping, right? Not fanning that flame of kind of the Gramya Katha, of just kind of the village talk, of being involved in people's lives and trying to find some sort of flavor or some sort of sense enjoyment or something from discussing other people's issues. I think that is super counterproductive, and it leads to a lot of misinformation. And often the people who pay for that immediately and even long term are the children, because through the grapevine things kind of trickle into their ears, and they know people are talking about them, or they what to speak of, if the parties involved are not giving appropriate space to each other and are not keeping in mind the children and how they may be affected. It's something definitely that as a community we should be aware of, and we should be very tactful and very sensitive, especially to how children experience these situations, because it can be quite traumatic regardless of the outcome of the situation, whether the family is repaired, whether the family is fractured or, reconfigured in some way, whatever, the children are deeply affected, and it's something that's very, very sensitive. So we want to, again, preserve their dignity also, and preserve their peace of mind and the peace of mind of, extended family members, other people that may be involved. This includes, a high degree of privacy, like I said, making sure that this doesn't it doesn't kind of degenerate into gossip, because that's something that is harmful, and it's also self-centered. It's about how it makes me feel to talk about something rather than how I'm showing up to support. So for the last line, kirtaniya sadahari, I think that there's something very powerful, and perhaps it's something that is not talked about enough, but how our own personal prayer, our own personal conversation with divinity can and will influence not just the situation itself, but also how we show up to the situation. So really praying for support ourselves from Krishna in how to best serve, right? And not just in a practical sense, but also in terms of our own feelings. This is likely, these situations is likely to move so much within us and really bring up a lot of emotion. Once we have that emotion, if we're really doing our work to kind of see it and be with it and allow ourselves to have the full emotional experience, then to pair that with prayer. I was thinking about how now, all these festivals are coming, Advaita Acharya's appearance day is coming, and how he's such a role model for intercessory prayer, right? For a prayer to intercede on behalf of a suffering party. And in his case, it was the suffering of all humanity. He took the time and dedication in such a humble and sweet way, just like offering tulsi leaves, but it made such a powerful, he literally moved Krishna, right? He moved Krishna's heart to come and bestow his mercy in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He prayed on behalf of others. It wasn't that he needed that himself, it's that he saw that people were suffering, and then his prayer was directed towards the people suffering. And we can do this in a very specific way. Of course, when we pray, we always want to pray for all of humanity and, the people of Kali Yuga and everyone who's suffering. Yes, of course. And in these situations, we can be very specific with our prayers. I pray for this person. I pray for this family. I want to dedicate this puja, this round of japa, my personal prayer, my journaling, kirtan, whatever. I want to offer that to these people who are obviously suffering and having a hard time. And then in terms of kirtan, the same. Obviously, kirtan and japa, it's all meant to be done for Krishna's pleasure. And Krishna is pleased when we love his devotees properly. So I think that it's not a disconnect. And also, when we chant kirtan and when we chant japa, I think that it would be appropriate also to maintain that humility of like, wow, there but for the grace of God go I. Like, there's nothing that's happening that couldn't also happen to me, or to my family, or to my kids, or my spouse, or my parents, So I pray that when I do kirtan, that, same shikshastakam, that I'm really able to cleanse the mirror of my heart, so that I could purify myself of whatever might lead me to endure some of these challenges, or to confront these challenges in the best way possible, in the most integrated way possible, in the most Vaisnava-like way possible. So I'll finish with just this last quote. Actually, my husband shared this with me this morning. He said, "Hope is a discipline." And that's a phrase that was popularized by an activist whose name is Mariam Kaba. And so hope is a discipline sounds to me like it's not a feeling, it's something that's active, right? So she describes that it's a daily practice of choosing progress, working towards a better future, and taking steps, even small ones, to create change. She says that it actually requires effort, and it takes having a vision and a commitment. And she contrasts it with passive optimism. Oh, I hope that works out. I hope that's, I'm sure everything works out in the end. Everything is Krishna's will. That kind of stuff where it's like, it allows you to take a very passive stance, and you can be optimistic, but you're not in any way propelling a situation towards its best possible outcome. So she says that it requires action, and effort, especially during difficult times. Meaning, when the going gets tough, that's actually when Vaishnavas want to show up, right? It's like the firefighters who run toward a burning building rather than away from it. So it's basically saying, if we're the ones who are equipped with the highest philosophy and the greatest disposition to serve, we should be headed toward the burning building and not away. And of course, gauging our capacity for that, which we talked about with the trees and the different seasons. She says that hope involves actually concrete actions, right? And so these concrete actions can be simple day-to-day things, and they can also involve concrete actions that are directly connected to our spiritual practices, such as our sadhana and prayer. And she says that actually cultivating hope as a discipline allows a certain consistency of showing up that actually builds strong communities, even when we're overwhelmed. She actually adds that in, even when overwhelmed, it helps to build a strong community. So I think that that's what we're aiming for. I think that that's an appropriate goal for us to have as a community. And I also know that, this is the beginning of a conversation. It's something that's meant to be talked about together. It's meant to be many conversations. So yeah, I would really love to hear what you think. If anyone has questions, if anyone has comments, or kind of just keep the conversation flowing. But those were the kind of main points that I was thinking of when the topic came to mind.
I'll start out here. Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. I have a whole page of notes scribbled down here from all the points, and the way that you blended the verses of Shikshastra into formulas for relationships and for our own personal growth, I thought was fantastic. And by the way, I would like to get that reference of the author that you were quoting from, but you can do it offline or something. But I thought those were some great ideas and points. One thing I guess, just to sort of even open this a little more and broaden this to some point, is it seems like what you have given us is an incredible map, an outline for our personal growth, our personal relationships, the way that we should try to interact in a way that we can be helpful to our community members, to our friends, our family, etc. Now, I'm wondering if beyond that, do we need to do more specifically as a community? Are there things that we could organize as a community, whether it be education, training, counseling, whatever, to be able to be even more helpful, or maybe even to be preventive of some of these situations that have arisen? I want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I think that there is a lot. They always say the best prevention is education, and I think that there's one of the things that I find happens most often, and it's because people I know that I work in this field, they'll ask, like, do you know a marriage counselor? Do you know a child's counselor? Do you know a family? And it's like, yeah, we don't even know who the specialists are that work in our field. It's like you suddenly have, some bodily condition, you have a rash or you have something, and then someone comes to you and like, do you know a doctor? It's like, what, you don't have a doctor? Like, you gotta have a doctor. So it's the same. It's basically saying, like, know who might be able to be skilled and whose training is appropriate for the different situations that go on. It shouldn't in any way be a rarity for people to need counseling. It shouldn't be a rarity for people to want to learn more about what makes marriages healthy. I often give the example of, like, going to the gym. We don't just want to go to the gym when we're terribly out of shape. We want to be going to the gym regularly so that we don't get terribly out of shape. So in the same way, I think that it would be wonderful to have workshops about healthy relationships, workshops that are specific to different issues that marriages go through, like betrayal or financial difficulties or having new kids or having kids in a certain age period or kids leaving the home and experiencing, like, the empty nest phenomenon. So it's like different things of life developmentally that take place that are sort of common phenomenons across the family life experience. Having educational workshops or seminars where people can kind of come together and talk about these things, not even just didactically, like some professional standing there and being like, this is, but really coming together as a community and having different, at this point, especially in Alatra, we have so many different generations of couples and different generations of families, where I think it would be really healthy for couples that have been together for longer to share their wisdom and express how they've endured challenges to couples that are younger, and people who have older kids talking to people who have younger kids. And I can tell you, as a mother, how precious, actually invaluable it's been to consult with moms who have already been through what I've been through, and to listen to their wisdom. And it's not necessarily that their experience replicates my own and that I'm going to do things exactly, but just to have context and to have a reference and to be able to experiment with different things. And also it's very healthy for couples to talk to other couples, so I think that part of it would be great to have like a formal situation, like learning opportunities is kind of what you're proposing. I think that would be brilliant. So there's the like professional setting, which is that we need to know who our professionals are, and we also need to encourage those people who have an inclination toward that kind of support and toward that kind of work to pursue that. If you're interested in counseling, if you're interested in psychology, if you're interested in relationship work or social work or child protection or, marriage work, then, okay, these are the avenues where you can pursue that, and really encourage our youth because those are going to be the counselors in just a few years. And then whoever the professionals are now within the devotee network, and perhaps also out, because there's just like there's expert doctors that aren't devotees, there's expert counselors that aren't devotees. Knowing who the help is. Then in like a formal way, education opportunities, workshops, seminars, teaching. And then in an informal way, but still intentional, is people really developing relationships where they can explore each other's experiences in confidence, really being able to kind of reveal. Most of us don't know what the inside of another marriage looks like, or what the inside of another family looks like, even when we hang out with them a bunch, even if we've grown up with them, or we're around each other and our kids are friends. It's very rare that we really reveal it, and it can be so beautiful. And also very normalizing to realize, like, oh, those people go through something that's just like what we go through, and then so do these people, and okay, like, all right, let's figure something out then. And I feel like that normalizing is actually the beginning of the healing process, is often just normalizing and realizing, oh, okay, this is something that happens, so this is something that can be worked on, and we can get through this.
Great. We're open for the questions here.
Haribo?
You can
Yeah,
start
Sukita,
your
go
video.
ahead.
Okay.
Start your video.
I tried to, but it doesn't seem to work. I don't know why.
Let's go ahead then.
Okay. So, Dhanya, I just want to give you an A+ on this. It was just really so...
My teacher gave me an A+. Mother Sukita was my math and science teacher, so I feel like my 11-year-old self has just achieved something important.
It's just you brought in so much scripture, but in a very practical way, breaking it down and how to view things, how to feel things, how to do things. So especially right now in our community, because the one, marriage seemed to be breaking up. Now it seems like maybe not, but it was really wonderful for me to always, like, you really mentioned impartiality, like looking at both people's sides, not like taking a side, like this one's wrong and this one's right. And, that you really have to look at the whole picture. I was wondering what you thought of, I just thought of this, see what you think, like a day seminar, let's say, advertising sumptuous prasadam, because it seems like when there's wonderful prasadam, people come more often than if you don't have it. And that, breaking into groups and talking about, stressors, maybe 4 people together, depending how many people came, people talking about, stressors in the marriage, challenges, and then things that make it stronger, and then writing them down, and maybe coming together and with, experts, professionals like yourself, helping make sense of it. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful. I think that, there's in academia, in research, there's usually 2 different kinds of research. There's like quantitative research, which is like, I'm in a lab, I'm a scientist, we're measuring different, and they have like the scientific method where they set up, of course, I'm like teaching to a teacher, this, but, there's, you come up with a hypothesis, and then you go and you test it, and you start with the premise that your hypothesis might not be right, but you're going to try it out, right? So then there's qualitative research, and qualitative research has this really beautiful methodology, which is actually Brene Brown. This is her thing, actually. This is how she does research, is grounded theory. So grounded theory means she's actually in the field, and she's observing. right? Neutral, like you were saying, from this perspective of impartiality. She's going in as an observer, but an observer who's ready to pick up on patterns. And so what she does is that she starts collecting patterns, and she starts creating these definitions and these concepts that are based on the commonalities and the patterns, and the things that she's seeing are grouped together. And she does this with other minds. So she does research in teams. She's not like this solo kind of rogue. And so when she does that, what she does is that she creates theories and she creates understanding based on the information and the lived experience first. And from there builds like that's a grounded understanding of a reality. And so I'm hearing that in what you're saying, which is, what if people came together and just talked about, in a vulnerable, confidential space, what their lived experience is. And then now let's like try and figure this out as a group, and then maybe pair that with some, expertise. I think that would be great. The other thing I wanted to add on to the first thing that you said is, yes, impartiality is important in terms of our bias and in terms of our judgment. And also, it's okay, and it's still impartial to say this behavior or that behavior or this thing that's happening or this circumstance that they're dealing with, what's happening, there's actually not okay. That's not okay. That actually is not in line with our values, or even with that person or those people's professed values. And that is going to generate suffering. It is impartial to say that, because what you're doing is you're just kind of stating a situation, you're describing a reality. And so I think that there's going to be some nuance there and some kind of important self-reflection in how to be able to fully acknowledge that a situation, something that's happening, is definitely not okay, that people are suffering, and even that it generates suffering within me, and that I don't want to tip that into self-righteousness, into judgment, into condemnation, or like criticism, because then what's going to happen is actually all those things are barriers to me having a full emotional experience to what's happening. So I just wanted to add that on. But yeah, I think the idea of what you were proposing sounds great.
I mean, I recently saw or heard Radhanath Maharaj, maybe you've heard this, talking about how when he was a child and his mother came to him and said, a lot of people love your father and a lot of people love me, but we don't love each other anymore, so we're going to separate. So Radhanath said he jumped off the bed, he ran out the door, he ran for blocks, and because he couldn't handle it, and when he came back, they were in a room and they were talking, and the mother was explaining what happened with their son, and they decided they would try to make it work. So, there's when I grew up, divorce was like, whoa, that they got a divorce. It was like so rare, but now it's so common. But people neglect, like brought up a Catholic, the whole idea of marriage was to have children and take care of the children. So it seems like a lot of that's been lost in the translation. So I also thought, maybe interviewing people who went through divorces and explaining how that affected them, and then how to bring the focus back, like you made it very clear, on the children. Bring the focus back on the children. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that that we could do something that I think would be interesting, which is, the reason the function of marriage is different throughout history, right? At some point, marriage was kind of like this survival arrangement, had political implications, right? How many times do you hear about marriages where it's like, this person got sent off to this country because these two kings decided to make an alliance? Like, marriage had nothing to do, even people's kids. So, even the way that people had the function of parenthood, the way that people did postpartum, so many things change historically, and I think a lot of it has to do with the context, and it has to do with the values, the things that people value. I think with a community as large as ours, and also the kind of generational shift of, first generation, second generation, now third and fourth generations, I think it would be interesting to kind of take it from that grounded theory place, which is having people come together and talk about, what is a marriage for? What does a marriage mean? Like, why are we getting married? Like, what is it really? Just like, oh, this is the one ashram where because you can't control your sex desire, then I guess you have to get married. That's not where I got married, So I feel like it would be interesting to have that conversation. I think that's a fascinating question of like, why are we getting married? What do we hope to do within a marriage? who are people, what are the top priorities of a marriage, including, children, and what does that mean? What does being married do for a child? And then if we are going to get divorced, which we are statistically, humanly, historically, sociologically, like it's definitely, and it's going to happen at a much greater rate than previous generations, because that's just what it seems to be trending. Like, how do you do that with integrity? How do you do a divorce in an honorable way? Is that possible? I have to believe it's possible. Every social phenomenon has to have some honorable process. And so I feel like that would be an interesting conversation. I think that's something that we can build as a community. Wouldn't it be wonderful for people to say, the Hare Krishnas are married and their marriages are great. And the Hare Krishnas, when they get divorced, they do that in the most honorable way. That would be amazing. I think that would be such a contribution. So anyways, just some food for thought for myself, even, of just like, how do you even do the dissolution of a marriage in a way that still feels dignified and feels honorable and still somehow aligns with our values?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have one. Thank you very much, Dhanya, for this excellent presentation. All the principles that you went over, do they also apply to the perpetrator? How we deal with the perpetrator, who caused the breakup, so to speak?
Do all the principles apply to the perpetrating party, or to the, and I would say yes, because these principles, from where I stand and from my understanding, have to do with my disposition and not the other person's disposition. So me affording somebody dignity doesn't have to do with them. It has to do with me. It's how I want to see somebody. And what do I think basic dignity is? Basic dignity doesn't mean I'm condoning your behavior, I applaud it, I'm going to try and in my mind justify why you're doing what you do. That's not what dignity is. Dignity means I don't have to mistreat you. I'm here taking a stance of nonviolence. I wish to do no harm. I wish no harm toward you. I hope the best possible outcome happens for you. I don't want you to suffer. That's dignity, right? So that's, and that doesn't mean no boundaries. I think boundaries and dignity actually go hand in hand. So the same thing with, any of these, you can pray for the perpetrating party. I think that it's brilliant to pray for the perpetrating party, and sometimes that's as close as we can get to that party. Sometimes as close as we can get before it harms us or it affects us, especially if they're acting in a way that is hurtful, that betrays their own values, where they're feeling defensive or when they're feeling angry, and there's all kinds of feelings of rage and of betrayal and, misunderstanding and feeling very defensive. So people act in ways that are very ungraceful and uncharacteristic. And so it's totally possible that we cannot get close to that situation, or that they act in a way where it's actually rejecting of other people and very contentious towards other people. That's not uncommon at all. It's extremely common. So you may not be able to get close. You might actually realize, I actually have to take a step back because this is a position where I'm going to get hurt, or someone else close to me is going to get hurt. Let me take a step back. But still my disposition should be that person has a essential dignity to them. I can pray for them. I should pray for them. That's actually my duty. And there's other ways in which I can support. Okay, maybe there's other people who are more amenable to support in the situation. Other people who are... And a lot of my support in the situation is going to be reminding other people that even in the worst of situations, there's an essential human dignity, Vaisnava dignity, that you can afford to someone and still effectively create boundaries, still effectively call out behavior that is not okay, that is unsafe, that is harmful, that is painful, that is, dangerous to the mental health of children, that is, whatever it is, that's, making feel unsteady the kind of fabric of a community. It's okay to acknowledge that and still have this disposition. Again, because it has more to do with how we are experiencing the situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not able to kind of act in a way that, has like basic critical thinking there in terms of addressing the situation.
Oh, thank you for that clarification.
Hare Krishna, Amaji. This is Karthika Chandras here. I have a quick question. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Basically, sometimes when we have a spouse who have some mental illness and they're somehow, as you said, contentious, they couldn't understand, they still try to, try to think negatively towards us, having like a little bit of revenge mode. And even though we try our best because they are not stable or whatnot, so what is the best process, at this point? I mean, we have a support structure, but still, as a spouse, as you said, I should pray for her. But what else I should do in this situation?
Yeah, so, well, I think what I'm hearing in the question is, what if your partner is the one that's experiencing a difficulty that feels even overwhelming for ourselves? If there's a mental health challenge or a relational challenge where there is that contentious energy and maybe even, like you said, an element of like revenge or, anger, defensiveness, besides praying, what else can we do? I think that one of the things that I've learned in my experience helping people through these situations and also experiencing it as a community member and as a friend is that we don't have to go through any of this alone. To feel isolated and to feel alienated during this time is very difficult. In fact, many times when people are experiencing a challenge, especially when they themselves are straying from their values, one of the first things they do is they start to isolate themselves and they alienate themselves. Because friendships, relationships, family relationships, community relationships, they serve as a mirror. They serve as a mirror for our behavior, and they serve as a mirror for our values and our beliefs and our goals. And so if my desires or my struggles or my challenges are not congruent with my values, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start isolating. And so if what we want to do is show up to a relationship in full integrity, which is not easy, I want to say, actually showing up, being supportive, especially if you're the spouse involved in the situation. If you're experiencing a challenge and you want to stay aligned with your values, it is an incredibly tall order. It's very, very challenging. And so my suggestion with that is to seek support, not on a one-time basis, but on a consistent, steady basis. So I would say dialing up relational intelligence, dialing up my capacity to share with people in confidence, reach out to professionals, reading up on things that I think might be helpful, listening to lectures. So basically turning up everything that I know would be good. Just like when you feel like you're getting sick and you start feeling like a cough, the first thing that you would do is like, okay, I got to dial up my vitamin C. I'm going to take zinc. I'm going to get some sunshine. I might start taking supplements. I might, I do my echinacea, all the things that we're basically all doing now because the weather's so weird here in Alatra. So all of that, we're going to be doing all of that, turning up everything that we know to be supportive. And that a big component of that is friendships and relationships that will keep you within the parameters of your own values, and they'll encourage you, these are the ways in which you could act the best towards this challenging situation that you have. This is what you could do. This is what you could say. Maybe don't say, maybe give this person space and support, that kind of thing. So even if the other person is contentious, even if the other person is going through their issue, you can always seek space and time from your friendships and your relationships where you can confer and get support. And that has to be a confidential space. It doesn't have to be 10 people or 15 people. It can be 2 people. But people who show up consistently. And I do want to say one of the things that when I've worked with people, or even in my own personal life, the people that I'm connected to, one of the things that they express has been the most helpful and the most healing and nourishing during times of difficulty is just someone reaching out to check in with them. But not once or twice, like regularly, consistently checking in. Whatever you think may be like too much, like, oh no, I don't want to impose. It's like, no, just check in. Not to find out information, not to talk even about the topic itself, but just to consistently, in the steady way, say like, hey, I'm here. I'm thinking about you. If you want some time, I'm here for you. Is there any way that I can serve you? Can I make you a meal? Can I pick up your kid? Can I, I've left you some flowers. Here's a maha garland. I left you a sweet at your door. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you today. Imagine if you're going through a hard time and a well-wisher, near or far to the situation, drops a little text message on your phone and just says, today I prayed for you. That would be such an incredible gift, So I think that those are all things that we can do. But the main point I'm trying to drive home is to stay connected to people who are genuine well-wishers when you're having a hard time is probably one of the best things you can do.
Thank you, Mataji. Appreciate it. Yeah, already, unfortunately, Krishna's mercy, I have a nice support structure here. So, yep. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I have a comment. I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. I'm on the phone.
Go ahead, Rana.
Okay, Haribol. Sorry, I am painting the house, so my get up. Danya, I love listening to you talk all the time. I mean, anytime you used to be on Hare Krishna community radio and stuff, it was wonderful. So I wanted to listen in, but I have two things to add. One, when I was a foster parent, which goes back quite a few years now, we were told that legally grandparents have no rights to grandchildren, unless the court says, okay, now you're the custodial guardian or whatever. So, yeah, it has to be kind of worked out because the parent wants the grandparent involved or whatever, but there could be different reasons for that. And then the other resource I really want to emphasize is NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. Gainesville has a very active chapter. So if you're a person with a spouse or a family member or somebody that has a mental illness, they have specific classes and support groups for people with a loved one that has a mental illness. So I participated in that and then also became a trainer for teaching other teachers and teaching classes and stuff. And it's like night and day difference. It's like you just get a whole different perspective and you're able to appropriately support somebody with mental health issues. You kind of learn your limitations. You can fix yourself, but you can't fix somebody else, and their behaviors are driving you nuts. So what do you need to do to take care of you so that you can deal with their behaviors and stuff like that? So anyway, just look up, it's called NAMI Gainesville, and everything is free. The classes, the support groups, they have classes and support groups for people with mental illness as well. But I think in this group that's not so much the issue. It's the issue of you're trying to help somebody who just seems very off the wall at the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's exactly why these conversations are so wonderful, because someone like yourself, Radha, is going to drop in and offer some incredible resources. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it would be great to build up a database. I know there's also Vaisnava Family Resources online, which offers a list of counselors, and sometimes they do like educational courses and stuff. The more resources we have like that, the better. And I think that we shouldn't be shy to take advantage of these incredible secular resources, because they're out there and their training and their education is excellent.
We're getting very close to our time here. I see there's why don't we take maybe one or two questions? Samapriya, you have a question? I see Samapriya.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna, thank you. Hare Krishna, my darling Dhanya, you're doing beautifully. I have a question. You had mentioned something before about the community being a reflector, kind of like a mirror to some difficulty someone might be going through. My experience sometimes is that it could go either way, because sometimes when we're too dependent on the way people are reacting to us, we change our place from coming from a genuine place to coming from a place to please others that might not be completely genuine. So I'd like you to explain a little further on that topic, how the community can be an actual assistant and a mirror image that can be to our well-being, or to one's well-being who is having difficulty.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this really takes the conversation into a next dimension, which really centers on this idea of authenticity, like being an accurate mirror. And I think that if we were going to start from a place of, let's say, just like a core spiritual principle, it means that we would all, to the best of our ability, be engaging in our own personal sadhana and personal spiritual practice that allows us to cleanse the mirror of our hearts first and foremost. Because otherwise we would be reflecting based on a filter. We would be reflecting based on our own anarthas. We would be reflecting based on our own desires, right? I want the situation to turn out a certain way. I have this idea of how things should be. That's coming from a place of ego, or that's coming from a place of, my own completely material samskaras from this lifetime, previous lifetimes. So we actually can't show up properly in community if we're not taking the time to cleanse that mirror of the heart of ourselves. And then breaking from that place, I would say, when we were talking about humility, when we were talking about the Shikshastakam, more humble than a blade of grass, one of the things that she was talking about, Brene Brown, is she was saying grounded confidence means that I'm secure enough in myself to admit I actually don't know everything and I can be wrong. And I'm willing to learn. So that willingness to learn means I'm willing to hear somebody out in a situation. And if there's somebody that I know, right? To know somebody, to really develop the relationship in depth, to do life with somebody. And again, this is not going to be a community at large. I don't have 150 people who know me really well and know me at my most, authentic self and know my aspiration, To know, when we talk about guhyam akyati prichati, it means to know the deepest spiritual aspiration in the core of someone's heart. That's like such a tender part. It's the most tender part of ourselves, right? And so to know that about somebody, if you know somebody that well, it means all these previous levels of emotional intimacy have been well established. Trust, understanding, knowing someone's upbringing, knowing someone's relational goals, marital goals, parenting goals, professional. You really know all angles of somebody, and then getting to know someone, doing life, being a true companion, discussing your values, your visions, your aspirations as a Vaisnava, as a human. Once that's all there, then you get to know the core of someone's heart. So only when you know somebody really well and when you've done life with them can you really have the privilege, actually, of knowing someone authentically, really who they are. And that person is going to be the most accurate mirror to them.
Certainly, certainly. So there should also be a warning that it's not that so many people are eligible to relate to someone who has a difficulty and help them solve the problem, because you have set right now a very high standard, which is the standard we all want to follow. And we have to be discreet who we reveal our hearts to.
Absolutely.
In that way. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That was very beautiful, and I pray that as a community we can come up to that level. That would be. But of course, if you compare where we were, I mean, you probably don't know where you were 50 years ago, but we're doing better than we were. Prabhupada has performed a miracle, and you're his darling granddaughter, and you're doing wonderful. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mata. Yeah, to be seen through the eyes of love. Thank you. I think that it is a very high standard. I think that it's important just to keep a North Star, and it's not necessarily that we feel like we can't support unless we have that level of intimacy. Those are just going to be the most accurate mirrors. But at the very least, again, to be able to say, from what I understand, from what I know, there's general principles, there's general beliefs, there's general values that we share as a community, and when we share those and people stray from those, it's okay, even as a far removed bystander, to say, wow, there's something happening there that doesn't seem okay, and I'm going to pray for that person, or I'm going to drop a meal off at their house, or offer their kid a play date. And those are all, practical ways. Yeah, I think that, there's so much growth that we still have left to do in terms of really deepening our emotional intimacy. I think that there's a lot of there's been a lot of fear maybe from interpretations of the philosophy of really going deep in terms of friendship. But the reality is we can't really go deep spiritually if we don't have a complete emotional experience attached to it, because it's one of the instruments that we have actually for having a spiritual experience. Is not just the physical body, but also the emotional body. So I think that's kind of what we're getting to here, which is how do you do human life in community properly? And you're right, there's a core few people who are going to know the most about a situation and are going to be able to most accurately support. And of course, the order is tallest for them too. I think that we should know whoever, and Bhakti Swami, he speaks to this a lot in his principles. He says, you should know that the people that are closest to you are the ones that are going to be there for you at the moment of death. And so based on that, you really have to care for those relationships. And we talked at the beginning about the samskaras, it's the wedding and the funeral rites. So it's kind of whoever are your people that you are close to, those are the people that you should be pouring into with the greatest intention, with the highest focus, with the most sensitivity, and it's a very tall order. Relationships are a very, very tall order. It's no small task at all. So thank you for that.
We have
I think this
question on.
Go ahead.
Says, if possible, would you please speak to the initiating guru's input/influence on marriage/divorce and healthy choices for family and society?
Oh man, I wish I could speak to this. I wish I could speak to this, but the reality is that I think that, again, this is very particular to a person or a marriage's relationship with their initiating guru. There are people who see their initiating guru once or twice in their life and never again. And so I think that the capacity to be instructed and to internalize an instruction and apply it appropriately might feel a little limited compared to the people who are kind of like on the ground doing life with you on a day-to-day basis. You know, obviously the relationship between guru and disciple is quite mysterious in many ways. Guru Tattva is mysterious. It's a mystical experience. It goes beyond rational understanding. And at the same time, I think that there's great potential, especially in the area of prayer and in the area of kirtan and in the area of, you know, staying steadfast to the guru's instructions. And anybody's initiating guru is encouraging us to read Shastra. Anybody's initiating guru is encouraging us to have healthy, productive relationships with other Vaisnavas and to seek support from like-minded devotees and to find ways to do service. So I think that those basic principles apply, but as far as the actual input into the function of the marriage and the divorce and, you know, like it says there, you know, healthy choices for the family and society, how specific that is in each family is going to depend, I think, entirely on how close they are with their guru. And also everybody's got different gurus. So I'm sure that the guidance is going to be looking different from family to family. I think that it is, you know, quite a challenge. And, you know, it's if I was going to take it to a much more superficial example, which this may not be the perfect analogy, but it's one that's coming to mind. It's like, you know, what about the initiating guru's input or influence on health choices for like physical health and well-being? It's like, well, I mean, generally the guru is going to have some idea of how to keep a body healthy, but you need to go to a doctor to talk to you about what your labs look like at this point in your life and how to best support your health conditions. And the guru ideally would encourage you to have frequent conversations with your healthcare providers to make sure that your physical health is supported and to make sure that your lifestyle reflects that. So ideally, the guru would be encouraging you to seek the support that feels most relevant and most helpful to your given situation, including professionals in the field, including close friendships and the guidance and support of well-wishers. So yeah, that's kind of all I have on that. There's a big I don't know around that, because I think one of the issues that many people struggle with is feeling like there's a gap in their relationship with their guru if they're initiated, which in many cases that might not be the case, or one person is initiated and the other one isn't, or they have different gurus. There's all kinds of spaces there where we could have a lot of conversation, and gurus would also have to, you know, figure out some sort of system to really be present and understand what's going on in people's lives, because otherwise then it feels like a giant disconnect, and then we just kind of throw everything into this ideological place that feels very far removed, not so context relevant to whatever's going on, and then actually it generates quite a lot of shame. It generates quite a lot of shame to feel like you're not living up to some spiritual ideal or to something you heard in a guru's class that maybe he was referring to something completely different, or he was referring to, you know, the marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, and you're like, I'm not Devahuti now, what am I going to do? My guru's going to be so disappointed. It's like, maybe that's got nothing to do with your situation. So we start to kind of like, you know, make assumptions and internalize. So I think that you're pointing to a big gap, which is stuff is happening in marriages and gurus may not have an idea of what's going on in there, and maybe it is not even their place in certain situations to afford a certain kind of help that would be better afforded by someone who either has professional training or who's even like boots on the ground, like actually living the day-to-day life, and I think that would also be healthy.
If I could I know we're running out of time, but if I could make a comment on that, in my I used to, of course, be much more active with marriage counseling and relationship counseling for about 30 years with my wife. And we found that many gurus, especially sannyasi gurus, didn't feel that comfortable, didn't really feel it was necessarily their place and position. They often would refer couples to us. And so, I mean, many times, I was sort of taking that role and trying to keep the gurus, their particular principles and mood, intact, but not, but that wasn't really the groundwork. But in other words, offering the relational and communication advice and help that could be given that they may not have felt comfortable doing. And now I don't know, it's hard to say how it works in every case. Like you said, it's so diverse and it's a huge topic. And I think sometimes there's been problems caused and sometimes they've been incredibly helpful. I have been in a room with someone like Radhanath Swami addressing a young woman who wanted to leave her husband. And I thought his remarks were so right on, so correct, and just addressed the thing perfectly. So it's going to vary a lot, and sometimes it can be very helpful and be very supportive, and sometimes it's not really the place necessarily where you're going to get. But one thing I would really advise people or caution people is don't make a negative feeling in your something if your guru's who's a sannyasi is not expert on marriage and family therapy. I mean that's they're there to give the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, to give us Srimad Bhagavatam, give us Bhagavad Gita, and to help us to know how to apply these things in our lives. But like you said, they're not going to know everything about medicine. You go to a doctor. So you have difficulties in relationships, marriages, you need to go to people who know, who can be helpful and be expert. And I just want to say a final thing is I think we've all found this to be an incredible program. And I think we're going to want to ask you to come back because I think we got just a very tip of the iceberg of your vast knowledge and wisdom and experience here. I found it very impressive, and we certainly would like to get more in the future and work with you more.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to be able to serve in this capacity in my work, and also it's informed a lot of how I didn't grow up in a devotee community, and so now as an adult I feel like I'm learning how to be a community member, and it's been so interesting to be learning from so many people here, yourself included, on how to really show up and have these long-term friendships and relationships where we're really trying to do life together and show up in the best way possible. So I'm learning, and I'm just sharing what I'm learning. So I really appreciate the space and time to do it, and I also hope that it's a continued conversation. We have a treasure trove of people in this community who by life experience or professional training are just so well endowed with wisdom and life experience. And I feel like so through so many things like this, the Seva care programs and the Nectar Talks, and we're starting to churn like, wow, people, please, like, share your realizations, share what you're learning, share your questions, share. So kind of, I think that is also, doing community and realizing like, wow, there's like gems and jewels of wisdom that are just, walking around. You see them at the temple on the Sunday feast and Haribol, and like, they're like this whole encyclopedia of life experience. So I'm really, I look forward to learning also from others in the community and keeping the conversation going.
Very good. Okay, I think that this is all for today. I think we could go on another hour or two, but this it is our time is up on. Once again, thank you so much, Dhanya, for this very, very enlivening and enlightening conversation. Thanks to all of you who came on this kind of strange time of 11 o'clock in the morning during the week. And so once again, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to, I guess, February will be our next presentation. Stay tuned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Vancha
Jai
Kalpa
Prabhupada.
Kripa Sindhu Devi Patitano Pavane Bhyo Vaishnava Namo Namaha. Hari Bol.